Hey, it's Cody Deegan here, doing a David Bowie tattoo in black and gray realism. So it's been a while since I've made a video. I'm a bit of a Scarlett Johansson when it comes to social media. Anyway, this particular tattoo, as you can see, the stencil is quite simple. I've found that putting too many details in a stencil can be overwhelming, at least for me anyway. So I try and keep my stencils pretty simple, try and get all the important landmarks. I'm only using 2 needles today. I'm using a 5-round liner, which you can see here, and I'm also using a 7 curved magnum. The machine I'm using is a Bishop wand shader. For my inks, I'm using a 4-value set made by Empire. It is just a basic gray wash set. And then I'm using a black ink from Eternal for my dark blacks. I run my needle out a little farther on my liner, just so I can see a little bit better when I'm putting the needle into the skin. I don't have it out real far. It's maybe out about maybe 3 millimeters, 3.5 millimeters would be my guess. So here you can see I'm using the liner around the chin to give it a much more sharper edge. And I'll also be using it around that crystal globe. So here you can see I'm using the liner needle the same way I would use a magnum needle when I'm shading. It's also similar to the stippling or dot work style. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want a sharp edge here, but I don't want the edge to stand out away from the shading. You know how sometimes when you do a nice dark line and then you try and shade up against it, you can still see the difference between your shading and your line. I'm choosing to shade with the liner away from this line so that when I get in there with the magnum, they kind of blend together and you don't see a distinct difference between the line and the shading. So once I come away from that line a bit with the liner, then I'll go ahead and move in with a magnum and start shading off of that dark tone. And that way they blend together, and then I don't feel like I'm accidentally shading over the top into that sharp line and softening it. I do turn the magnum a lot here. I'm using the corner to help get along that edge of that globe. And since I'm dark under the chin, I'm coming away from that dark gradually lighter. And I do that by dipping in my darkest gray wash inks. And then as I get further away, I will dip in the lighter value gray wash inks. And so here you can see I'm just sweeping. And by sweeping, that helps ensure that there's no hard edges to the magnum strokes. It's all nice and soft. Even in these little areas, I'm still sweeping. I'm just sweeping in, sweeping out. Because the whole goal here is to not have sharp edges. You want the shading to be nice and soft all the way around. So here with that mouth, again, we want a nice sharp edge here, so I'm going to work this in with my liner needle. And I'm being a little meticulous with this. There's a certain shape to the line of his mouth, and I want to make sure that I get it properly and follow the correct line. Since there are a few lines in my stencil, I just want to make sure I'm on the correct one. And I'm really trying to follow the contours of that particular line. here you can see I'm sweeping in the black off of that line upwards to give it a little bit of shading. And now I'm doing the same down at the bottom lip, because on my reference image I've noticed that down below the lower lip in that particular region it's darker there. And it's a little bit of a sharp edge just in that one spot. Here I am working on the mouth line again, reinforcing that shape. And then because the nostrils are so small, but there is a little bit of black in there, then I'm going to go up in that area with my liner as well and just shade those in. Very, very similar to how I would use a round shader. And then I'm working a little bit of black down in that lower center region of the nose. And then it's back to the Magnum needle. So I'm shaping that lower lip. I'm coming off that black I did with the liner. Coming off of that black with a darker gray. I'm just sweeping, doing a few passes. Enough passes to where it starts to build up and look solid. And coming around that other side, you can see my stencil starting to go in this region, so I'm starting to pay particular attention to the reference photo, making sure that they take that edge of the lip to the right spot. And there's soft shading around the corners of that mouth. Now I'm going to start shaping the underside of that nose, coming off that black with a darker gray. And that upper lip, that center line, I've turned my mag sideways a bit to make it more narrow, so I could just shade that in really quick. So here I'm just trying to follow the contours of the shapes of the face, the major shapes. They're pretty prominent in my reference photo, so I feel like this is pretty easy to follow along with. This is kind of a rounded shape, so I've got my dark area, I've worked that in first, and I'm just layering over the top, building up the value, and then pushing it off towards the light. I'm doing the same thing here on the chin, coming along that edge. It starts to give it a roundness. I've kind of turned the Magnum on its edge to help cut in the side of that face where it meets up with the hair. Now this edge is semi-sharp around the mouth, but I don't want it too sharp, so I don't want to line it. So I'm just going to use the corner of the Magnum to try and get it kind of sharp, but not too sharp. Doing the same thing around this nostril. I didn't really want to line around it. I feel like that would be too sharp. Same with the other side here of the cheek. So I'm just using the Magnum kind of at an angle with the corner going in a little bit deeper than the rest of it. So that way it's a little sharper along that edge, and then the shading comes up soft on that top side. So it helps give that whole cheek area a little bit of a shape to it, a roundness. So I'm going to start shaping that cheek over here on the darker side, working in my dark values. It's almost got a triangle, almost like the letter V type of shape going here with that cheek. So it's coming down and it's going to be darker down at the bottom. So I'm trying to work that in, again following my reference. And then once I've got that in, the initial shading, I can build up on it. I can go over it a few more times, do a few more passes to help build that up until it looks right. And then I can switch to a lighter value gray and come off of that and keep pushing up towards the lighter region of the cheek. Now at the base of this cheek, I started noticing that the skin was looking overworked. It was starting to show some signs of damage. Now I feel like this probably was because my hand speed had increased. I was starting to work too quickly. And when my hand's moving too quickly, the needles aren't saturating the skin enough, so I have to keep going over it more and more, and that does more and more damage. So it's a good reminder that sometimes you just gotta slow it down. I'm also running the machine pretty fast. I've running this one at 8.7 volts today, and I'm also trying to pay particular attention to my hand speed. I spend a lot of time at the beginning of the tattoo session finding what I consider my ideal hand speed for the machine speed, and once I dial that in to where it feels right, then it's a matter of just trying to train myself during those first 10 to 15 minutes of the tattoo, train myself to remember how that feels and then try and maintain that speed through the rest of the tattoo. And there are times where I do feel myself speeding up because after a few hours, I have a natural tendency to start wanting to work faster. And once I see that the ink isn't going in as well, that's usually a cue that tells me, oh, hey, why is this not going in? And then it's usually because, oh, well, I've increased my hand speed. I'm going too fast. So now in the bangs around the eyes, I started using a liner. Again, like a shader, or more of like that stippling, that dot work type style. I wasn't exactly sure if I liked how that was going, so I actually did not use the liner like that throughout the rest of the hair. Now I didn't finish this tattoo in this session. She was getting pretty sore and opted to come back. She's doing a full sleeve anyway, so she has to come back. So I'd say we got about 3/4 of the way, maybe even a little farther in this tattoo. So I might do some more of that liner needle in the hair. We'll see. When she's back in a couple weeks, I'll be able to see how that healed up in that area compared to how the rest of the hair looks, because I did the rest of the hair with a Magnum needle. So I'll be able to kind of compare and see, okay, well, do I want to keep using the liner? I don't think I really need to. There might be a few spots around some of the hairs that might do well with a liner if I just, there's a few stray strands that really stand out, and maybe I will want to accentuate those a little more, but we'll see. Here in the eye, you can see I'm making sure to get some gray values in that eye, even in the whites of the eye, because there's no white in the photo reference. Sweeping in some of those softer values on the lighter side of the face. Now in this region here was the very first place where I actually saw some blood during the tattoo process. When that happens, I like to double check the depth of my needle, see how far the needle's coming out the end of the tip, make sure it's not coming out too far. More than likely, just overworked that area a little bit too much when I was using those softer grays. The softer grays don't go in very dark, so you got to be careful with those because sometimes you can overwork the skin. This is the first tattoo video I've made just with my phone. If you've seen any of my other videos, normally I have a pretty extensive camera set up. So today was like an experiment. I really liked how I've seen other people's videos where you can actually get in and see what the needles are doing. And I never really felt like I could get in as close as I wanted to with the big cameras. So that's how this video came about. Just an experiment. So the problem is my phone died, so I didn't really get as much footage as I wanted, but I was able to take a picture with my iPad at the end of the session. So this is as far as we got today. And yeah, I thought it turned out pretty well. I'm looking forward to finishing this one in a couple weeks. And I hope you enjoyed following along with me.